Oh! Whoa. Watch out now.
Special thanks to Total Boat for sponsoring this video. Alright, welcome back to the shop. So for this project I decided to do it two ways. Not only with wood species, but also with joinery. I know a lot of people don't have a domino, but on one version I will use the domino and the other version will be traditional mortise and tenon with a drawbore. After milling up my lumber, I wanted to make a quick visual template so I could see how the legs would interact with the top and the overhang needed. I decided on a 24-inch diameter top, which gives me a 12-inch radius, so I can screw that down and quickly get a perfect 24-inch circle. I also used my square to find the exact center of that circle, and then I came in an inch because I thought that's what I wanted my overhang to be. I can then lay out where my legs are going to go, as well as the bottom stretchers. Rather than have the legs at a perfect 90, I decided I want them to angle in just a little bit, so I went with a 3-degree splay. I cut them at the miter saw to length and put a 3-degree bevel on each end. Then I could mark up where my bottom stretcher would go. I came 7 inches up from the bottom. And it was at this point I realized that 1-inch overhang just was not quite enough, so I made it 2 inches. With a couple of legs clamped into position, I could measure the distance for my stretchers and then cut them at the miter saw. And be sure to save those cutoffs to use as clamping blocks later on when we glue this thing up. Now I could grab the domino and plunge for all the mortises in the stretchers. The legs will come later. Now the joinery for the stretchers themselves is a half lap. So to do that, I went to the table saw and set up a dado blade. Now if you don't have a dado blade, you can just use a regular table saw blade and just chew away more material. I then used a router plane to even up and flatten out those bottoms. And then a quick test fit. Nice. Flushy flush. Once I knew those fit together and were sized correctly, I could now plunge for my mortises in the legs. Now I could do a quick dry fit to make sure everything fit together. You just spin it to win it. And that looks good. So now we could move on to version 2, which is out of Sapele, or Sapele, or Mahogany, or however you want to say. This will be the mortise and tenon version. First, I rip all my legs to width, which is 2 inches, and then I cut them to length with the bevel on the ends at 3 degrees, just like before. But my layout is a little bit different. I'm not laying out for dominoes now. Now I'm laying out for mortises. Now my mortises will be square to the legs. However, the tenons are going to be angled to account for the 3-degree splay. I use a 1-inch Forstner bit at the drill press to clear out the majority of the waste on the lower and upper mortises. Then I head over to the bench and grab a mortising chisel to square up all those corners and work on making those walls nice and square. Oh, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you can be notified every time I put out a new video, and I guarantee you there will be a lot more in 2021. Well, I mean, if that interests you. And I hope it does. Because I will be putting out more content. Alright, I'm not going to lie, that took a while. But they're done. Now, let's cut those tenons. Back at the table saw, I still have my dado blade set up, but again, if you do not have a dado blade, that is not a problem. The real important cut on a tenon on the table saw is the first cut, which is the shoulder. Once that is established, you can just chew away the rest of the material with your saw blade. Now before I do any shoulder cuts though, I want to make sure I have a nice tight fit on my tenon into my mortise. And now I do. So my blade is set perfectly, so now I grab my miter gauge, adjust that to 3 degrees to match the splay on the legs. I set up a little stop block here, and my first cut, as I said, is my shoulder cut. Then I can make a few passes to clear out all the material. Now to cut the top side of that tenon, I need to turn my miter gauge the opposite way in 3 degrees. And then I can flip my piece over and repeat the same process. And for those of you in the back seat, here's what your view would look like. And by the way, all of this could be cut on a bandsaw or by hand. It's up to you if you don't have a table saw. Now, since my tenon needs to be 3 degrees, I can come off that 3-degree shoulder with a square, and it gives me a 90 off there, which essentially is a 3-degree or 87-degree angle off of that. Then over at the bandsaw, I could trim those edge cheeks. I left that cut a little bit short so I could get in there nice and clean with a chisel. And then a little test fit. The most critical part of a mortise and tenon is making sure that those sidewalls in your mortise are square and the cheeks on your tenon are also square so you have a nice tight fit there. That is where your strength comes from when you glue up long grain to long grain. Now I could do a quick dry assembly, and for some reason I didn't film any of the upper stretcher assembly, but I can tell you that I did not cut those to length until after the bottoms were in and I could double check that measurement. Then I cut them to length and cut my tenons. Next I could lay out the position of the pegs for the draw bore, and I drill those out on the table saw. Yeah, table saw, oh my gosh. Drill press. Hello! And if you're not familiar with a draw bore mortise and tenon, the only difference between that and a regular pegged tenon is that the hole in the tenon is slightly offset so that when the peg is driven through, it pulls the tenon further into the mortise and closer and tightens up that joint. It gives it incredible mechanical strength, that so much sometimes it doesn't even require glue. And here's a good visual of how the hole in the tenon is slightly offset from that in the leg. Now I'm making my own dowels for this, since trying to find 3/8 Sapele dowels is a little bit difficult, so I ripped them to width on the table saw and then using a block plane just kind of eased all those edges. Now I can chuck this thing up in a drill, and then I have a 3/8 inch dowel plate I'm going to drive it through. I found that using a drill for this instead of just hammering it home with a mallet creates a much smoother and straighter dowel. As you can see, that looks pretty nice. Now I can trim them to length on the miter saw, and then you want to sharpen up those tips. That way when you drive these home, they glide past that draw bore offset a little bit easier. Now to assemble the top and bottom stretcher assemblies, I'm using some screws, glue, and then I'm going to plug those. Now this is done on the underside of those stretcher assemblies. That way there's no visual holes on top that water can get in. Hey, what do you guys think? Alrighty then. Once the glue was completely dry on all those, I could flush them up and then sand them down even flusher. More flush? So the last time I used epoxy in one of my videos for a glue up, some people suggested to use shellac around those areas. That way any squeeze out could be easily removed with some alcohol. We shall see if that worked. Now for the glue up, we are using Total Boat High Performance Epoxy Resin, which is a 2-part system, and make sure you mix that hardener and resin together for a good 2 to 3 minutes to make sure all ingredients are integrated and you don't end up with improper curing. Now I'm using epoxy here for the open time, but also this is an outdoor piece of furniture, and despite some other kind of waterproof PVA glues, I just don't trust them. I've had them fail outdoors before, so I'm going with a marine grade epoxy. Oh, and remember how I told you to save those clamping blocks? Well, here you go. Now you can put them on your 3-degree angled legs, and you have a nice 90-degree clamping pressure. So in goes the first draw bore peg. And the second, that's still the second. Also, still the second. I won't show you all the other ones. But now the beauty of the draw bore, this thing is so tight, I can just remove the clamps and set this thing off to the side and go to the white oak version. So here we are with the dominoes. This went together nicely as well. And in case you were wondering, I used masking tape and CA glue to affix those clamping blocks to the legs. Now I could turn my attention to the concrete tops. But first, I needed to make forms for that concrete. So I'm using my router and a trammel on some melamine. Melamine is a great surface for concrete forms because it will not stick to it. So since I'm making 2 tops, I made 2 forms so I could have each drying at the same... Oh my gosh, there's a guy's worst nightmare. And then over to the bandsaw to cut as close to my line as possible, and then the router table with a flush trim bit to give me 2 perfectly smooth 24-inch diameter melamine tops, or bottoms, or yeah. To create the edges of the forms, I grabbed some PVC trim from a local home center, kind of trimmed off the profile to make it flat and square. And then took a quick measurement to get my, oh gosh. What the? Why? So it turns out pi r squared doesn't really take into account the thickness of your material? I don't know. Anyway, I screwed this thing all on and then used a little heat gun at the end to get that last bend so I could screw it home. and then put a little patch in with some PVC glue and some silicone, followed by a schmear and some white Gorilla Tape so it all blends together. And a quick play break with Jerry. Now I'm using this GE Black silicone, mold-free, lifetime guarantee, Pro's Choice. Now in order to spread this in the corners and get it nice and smooth, people use like a cake fondant ball tip or something, but I grabbed one of my wife's 1980s earrings and stuck it in a piece of walnut, and that worked pretty good. Got a nice smooth bead, and then once it's dry, you can just peel off the excess. How about that? And throw it away. And to remove any remaining residue, I grabbed some mineral spirits and wiped the form clean. And there you have it. Now the likelihood of the concrete sticking to melamine or the PVC trim is pretty low. I figured I'd hit it with some butcher's wax just in case. Oh yeah, and here's what we're using. White Concrete Countertop Mix by Concrete Countertop Solutions. And full disclosure, Concrete Countertop Solutions was very kind to provide the materials needed for this pour, so thank you very much, and links below are to all the products I used. Sounds exactly like the directions on my pancake mix, so start by adding 1 quart of water and any integral pigment. Enter integral pigment, bright white. Continue to add water for a flowable, batter-like consistency. Back to pancakes again. So the bag said to use a maximum of 3 quarts of water and a minimum of 2.75. So I started by adding 1 quart of water and roughly 1/3 of a bag and get that mixed up. I added more water and more concrete, and then I added the integral pigment. And I found that this actually dried out the mix even more, so I had to add additional water above the 3 quarts that it said on the bag until I got a nice consistency, batter-like. Then I just poured it into the form, spread it around with a little bit of a trowel, and it was at this point that I realized, oh, I don't have enough. So I mixed up the rest of the bag and poured that in. So each one of these forms took a full 50-pound bag perfectly. I tried to screed this on the top, but it actually started to set up pretty quickly. So, I mean, that worked, just not well. But also in the first one, I forgot to put in the fiber mesh reinforcement. And for this small of a pour, I'm not sure it's completely necessary. So, I mean, you could go either way, I think, for something like this if you want to save the money and not put the mesh in. And as you can see, I also put some ratchet straps around the outside of these forms, just in case those sidewalls wanted to bulge a little bit. And I didn't have a Sawzall or anything to really vibrate these forms, so I grabbed a palm sander and a little mallet just to kind of tap out for the air bubbles, which helped, but you'll see later that it didn't eliminate them all, which I was totally fine with. And there you have it, 2 50-pound manhole covers and a giant mess. Now I let these cure for roughly 3 days, and then I was able to take off the forms. I'll admit I was a little nervous, hoping there weren't any cracks, but I was pleasantly surprised when I lifted it off. I mean, it was smooth as silk. The top almost looked like laminate or melamine itself. And there's where you can see those air bubbles along the outer edge, which again, I'm totally fine with. Makes it look more natural. Had a little bit of a ridge there from the bead of silicone, but we can clean that up a little later when we sand it. Now I'm going to be using stainless steel bolts and washers and also threaded inserts to attach the table bases to the concrete top. So to recess the bolt heads and the washers, I made a 2-step hole. The first was with a 1-inch Forstner, followed by a 7/16 drill bit. And that created this. To get my position to drill the holes for the threaded inserts, I just inserted a brad tip point through the holes and used those marks to drill with a masonry bit. I used a little tape flag to clear away the dust as well as tell me when I've reached the correct depth. Now, when you are epoxying in the threaded inserts into the concrete, one of the biggest things to remember is to put tape on the bottom of your threaded insert. That way, when you put it in the hole filled with epoxy, that epoxy doesn't come up into the threaded insert and clog up your threads. I used some clear packing tape just to make sure those threaded inserts were either flush with the surface or just below. And with the epoxy drying on those, I could turn my attention to the final trimming of the pegs and the final sanding and surface prep of both table bases. Now remember what I said about using shellac so I could clean up all the squeeze out a little bit easier? Well, it just did not work. Alcohol did not dissolve this, and I think it was because I didn't thin it out. I just used it directly out of a can, which is a pretty heavy cut, so I'll have to try it next time by diluting it out of the can a little bit with some alcohol first. So wherever I could get the router, I gave a 1/8 of an inch round over, and everything else got sanded by hand. And now it was time for finish. I'm using the Total Boat Gleam 2.0 Marine Spar Varnish, and the first coat needs to be diluted 25% with their brushing thinner. Now for a truly bomb-proof finish, Total Boat recommends using 2 coats of their penetrating epoxy first, which will soak into the wood and seal the grain, and then top coating it with the Gleam. However, due to cold weather here in the Northeast, I had limited time to get a couple coats on this, and which, by the way, that is the wrong respirator. That is for dust particles only, not for vapors and fumes. But I just couldn't find the dang thing in time for this coat. But I did find it, alas, and used it for the remaining coat. So, crisis averted. But minor damage probably done. And then a light sanding once the first coat was cured. And then, in a well-ventilated area, with the proper aforementioned mask, I put on the remaining coats outdoors in a safe area. And if you're interested in building tables like these of your own, there's a link in the description below. $4 for the SketchUp file and only $8 for the SketchUp file, the full plans, cut list, and parts list. When that was all cured, I used some epoxy on the bottom end grain of each of the legs to be sure that no moisture could be wicked up into those when these were outside. Now, I'm a woodworker, so I do what's comfortable. I grabbed some sandpaper on my orbital sander and sanded the bottom of these concrete tops instead of grabbing a polisher and all that stuff. You can see some of the aggregate showing through, which is kind of cool, but that's just for the bottom. For the top, I just used some water and some 600 grit wet dry sandpaper to kind of smooth everything out, get those ridges off the corners, and I wiped everything down and I was happy with the finish. Then it was time to apply the water-based top coat sealer by Concrete Countertop Solutions. This is a 2-part system with 4 parts A and 1 part B. Be sure to mix it thoroughly to combine all the ingredients. And then I just used a foam brush to apply it with nice even overlapping strokes. You could also use a roller on this, which I eventually will on subsequent coats, or also some sort of foam pad just to get that material on there, a nice, smooth, even, consistent film. Then I flipped it over and I worked on the top. And then the sides. Just make sure you do those sides after you do the bottom. That way when you flip it over, you don't get your hands all wet and your fingerprints in the finish. After that first coat was dry, I gave it a light sanding and vacuuming and a wipe down with a microfiber cloth to make sure I get all that dust. And then I applied the second coat. Now this stuff is overcoatable in 4 to 8 hours. So in the period of 2 days, I was able to get 4 coats on both of these pieces. And then it was assembly time, using some 2-inch stainless steel 5/16-18 bolts and washers. I attached each of the bases to each of their corresponding tops. And then I could flip them over and get a good look at the final pieces. And it's December, so it's the perfect time for new patio furniture in the Northeast. Thanks everybody for watching, and let me know in the comments below what you think of this combination of white concrete and wood for patio furniture. And be sure to hit that subscribe button below and turn on the notifications so you'll always know when a new video of mine is released. And as I told you before, there will be a lot more in 2021.